Okay, so right now what we have is a very unique piece of audio. This is a piece called Sundrenched. Sundrenched is a kind of a quasi orchestral piece. I'm going to take you over to this side of the equation and notice that, the levels are essentially all over the place, primarily because, well, they're recorded all over the place. So this is going to be a bit of a challenge for you. There are sort of French horns, sort of tuba, so sort of trombone, some violins and violas, and then there's some synthetic instruments. There's a psaltery, a little bit of piano, not much, very beginning. There's some harp, a couple of those with harmonics, some percussion, some rather heavy percussion, and some daiko, which is kind of fun. So let's take a listen to this. So it's a very short piece, under a minute 30. So let's give this a listen. I'm going to do this at regular. Love this psaltery here. These little swells here coming in with the violas and the violins. Check this out. Tremolo and brass comes in. Nice heavy hits in the percussion. Ooh. We end with some sultry. Great. So you'll have those pieces of music that will almost literally mix themselves, and this is kind of that. So you can make this essentially whatever you'd like it to be, but let's go ahead and apply the approach that we've been discussing up to this point. So what I want to do first is I want to put a stereo master fader on it. So we're going to go into track, create audio, stereo. Or in the audio section, go master fader, and then create. Now, and then in this, as I've told you, put a plugin in. This would be in the dynamics, and I would highly suggest, look at how embarrassing the list of compressors is. I told you. And this is on my secondary machine in the studio, so it's ridiculous. But go for the maximum. It's standard, garden variety, Pro Tools. Select the mix limiter, okay? And let's kind of listen to this. Watch where that attenuation is. Remember, in the attenuation, if it goes over 4, it's probably going to start breathing or pulsing. So let's kind of watch where this goes. So what? Sorry, a little frog in my throat. It's not COVID, I assure you. So what you need to do at that point is go, okay, so that's hitting over 4.9 dB. So what we want to do at that juncture is we want to either cut back on what's pushing that over, which I have my suspicions, right? Let me do this. I would suspect it's probably the percussion. So let's go up to that point. Let's see what happens. Boom, 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 boom. Yep, that's what happens. So you have a choice there. You can either do a group and drop everybody back, or you can say, okay, this is over modulating. I'm just going to grab the clip gain here. I'm going to bring this down a mite. So let's do that. Down about 2.8 decibels or so. Now let's see what it does. I'm going to click on the attenuation and zero that out. Wow. So it's in around the 3.2 range. So let's go back later in the mix, sorry. Let's look at where our brass starts coming in. Let's see how that affects it. So I'm going to zero out the attenuation by clicking on it. Wow. So that's really pushing it up there. Did you notice that? Really pushes it up there. So let's try to see what we can do there. We can drop all the levels back, or we could just simply backpedal maybe, close to 3 dB on everybody there in the brass. And this is, again, gain staging. But you're doing this before fader, okay? So let's try that. So again, I'm going to click on that. I have zeroed out my attenuation. So we're still getting some attenuation because of the percussion. So let's go ahead and peel that back again just a little bit. And again, this is straight up. The Pro Tools rule is, the industry rule is laid out by the AES, Audio Engineering Society, where it says negative 6 dB should, across maximum level, negative 6 dB coming out into your bus mix, or your front side bus, into your mix master fader, should be enough that it won't clip out the master fader. Okay, so let's drop everything back. We did just around 5.6. Still kind of hot flying in there, so let's back this off just a little bit more. Again, this is all I'm doing is cleaning things up and getting them ready to mix, because if I go in immediately and the master fader limiter is pushing that direction, we're going to have some real problems dynamically. So here we go. Again. Now, as I said, we're kind of trying to find out where all this is flying in at. So I'm going to back these guys off to about 5.6. There's plenty of level coming in on those. And this is pre-fader stuff, so don't think that you need to necessarily use your faders. Okay? Okay, here we go. Zeroing that out one more time. Just on that last hit, went to 4, so I think we're pretty safe. So as I went over, I'm dropping the gain stage back using clip gain. Okay, just to make sure that kind of does what it needs to do. All right, so let's take it back to the top of the mix. Now, the first thing I want to do, I've taught this. I want you to group some things. So let's go. Okay, here's their brass, right? So French horn, tuba, trombone. Let's shift click on all those nameplates. Alt shift click and then out. Click on that output. And then what we want to do is we want to put a new track in there. And I'm going to call that brass. Hit that. Right. So I'll click out of that, move the brass down here by the master fader. I am going to select all these folks and make them the same color. So brass is, most brass instruments are kind of gold colored, so I'm going to do that. Kind of yellowish. Just double click down here on the color code and selected a color. I'm going to try that one. Kind of orangish. So then we've got violas, violins. Okay. So I'm going to select that. Shift click. I'm going to Alt Shift click on this. Excuse me. Alt Shift click on this. Output. New track. Strings. Okay. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to double click down here and strings. Okay, I'm just going to make them kind of brownish. Okay, after I do that, click out of there, grab my strings. I'm going to move this down here because I just want my strings to be there. I tell you what, the best time to do some of this stuff is right when it's next door. So let's try this real quick. So I'm going to select all these. Another thing I taught you to do was soft solo. So with everything still selected in the group, that's not to be confused with this group over here. Okay, that's different. So in the submix group, I want to command click on the S's. And what that's going to do is when I solo that out, it mutes every other track out in the mix except for the strings. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing here for the brass. I'm going to select all the brass. Nameplates. I'm going to command click on the members of that mix group. And so when I do that, see, it solos out and mutes everything else. You notice here where it muted out the actual group of strings, which is kind of cool. So I'm going to click out of that. I'm going to move the strings down here because I just like, me personally, I like everything right there so I can grab at it. And you can go on. So this is all like percussion, stuff. And you can go through and do all these guys. So I'm going to go ahead and Alt Shift click on the output, new track, perk. Cool. So that's going to come up, and I'm going to soft solo command click on the S's for the members of the group, please. And then I'm going to double click on the color, and because I like percussion, it's red, hot red. Click out of that. Grab percussion. I gotta get rid of this guy. Hang on a second. Get him out of my way. Click down here. I'm going to move the percussion down here. Again, this is just me and how I do my track collective. So then we got harp, piano. Okay, so I'm going to refer to this kind of like in a different light. So I'm going to select all those guys. Alt Shift click. Output, new track. I'm going to call that piano harp. Okay. I don't think I can do that slash. Can I do that slash? That's a great question. Let me see if I can create that. Oh, yeah, let's go ahead and let me do that. Great. Double click on that. Oh, okay. Hang on a second. Harp, piano. There it is. Got to select this up to sultry. Double click on the color code. I'm going to kind of go piano. I'm going to go like Barney Purple just for giggles. And then command click on the members of the group. Okay, so on the solo, so I'm soft soloing all of this. Hang on a second, I cut the pad in that. Oh well, it's all right. I'm not going to be doing that pad. I'll fix that. So piano harp, I'm going to grab it, move it down here beside my percussion, and then on my pads, I'm going to select those. Shift click on the nameplates. Alt Shift. Click on the output, new track, and I'm going to put pads. How you name these is up to you, whatever you think you want to do. So I'm going to double click on pads, and I'm going to make that kind of like a deep blue-ish. And again, I'm on soft solo, command click on the solos, pad 1, pad 2, Click out of that, grab the pad track, and move it on down here. All right, so now I'm kind of ready to do some mixing. So when I listen back to this, one of the first things I've noticed is that I have a choice now because I have mixed all these guys down into subgroups down here, selecting these guys. So now that I've selected all these cats down here, so I can decide, okay, strings, brass, percussion, piano, harp, and pads. I can EQ there if I want to. I can compress there if I want to. It really comes down to what my preference is. So the first thing I'm going to do is this. I'm going to click out of this, and in the percussion, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, because it's in a group, I could do a parallel compressor, which I've shown you how to do in the past. Or I could, because it's percussion, I'm going to go ahead and insert a compressor. So it'll do a couple things. One, it's going to tighten up the dynamics just a little bit. And the other thing it's going to do for me is it's going to give some more girth to the percussion sounds without actually adding too much overload into the signal. So it's going to level it out. It's going to give it some girth, and it's not going to allow it to push the master fader over. So this is 1176, just happens to be the one that I picked. I set it to a 4-to-1 ratio. Meter is set to gain reduction, which is going to show me when this kicks back what we're dealing with. I'm going to set the attack for short here and short here. On the 1176, the attack happens here, quicker to the left, quicker to the right on the release. It's kind of weird. So let's take a look, see at this real quick. I'm going to play it. Let's watch what happens with the percussion. It's ever so little kickback here. I'm going to go ahead and select the maximum as well. Watching here. It's getting pretty good there. Getting some gain reduction. Should kick only down to about -1. Oh yeah. You can definitely hear when I engage that, there's much more girth to the sound. Okay, so what's happened here is I didn't even adjust the input and output on this. I just set it up to a 4-to-1 ratio and put a tight attack, a tight release. And you notice it's not kicking back too hard, which is great. And so that's giving me a nice percussion compressor. One thing you might have noticed in the mix that you might do, you can either, again, EQ individual elements, which I'm not going to do right this time through. Because I've grouped these guys, I'm going to go ahead and do individual, what would be your mix bus or your AUX. I'm gonna work on these right here. So the keyboard sound is a little bit, and the sultry sound is a little bit brilliant. So I'm going to use the EQ, and I'm going to find out where that sound's at. So let me double click, get back into the front of the mix, and let's hear where that's at. And the way I'm going to do is I'm going to do a sweeping EQ. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click these guys out. I'm going to tighten my Q for my high mids, and I'm going to bring it up, and I'm going to sweep and find that really, really brilliant, bright, almost painful level. Here we go. what I did was I found what I thought was really had this horrible nasally tonality in the sultry and in other things that were in that group of the piano harp. Okay, that's the one I'm working on right now. Let me back that up, and I did a sweep EQ and found this and said, okay, this might be it. So let me listen to it now. So far, it seems to have cut it nicely. Wow, that pad is really tight in that area, too. Let's listen to this next sultry. Okay, so that's starting to get a little hot in the mix. So what I'll probably do is go ahead and throw a compressor on the tail end of that as well. I'm going to go back to my BF76, which is like my favorite. I'm going to leave it at that 4-to-1 ratio. I'm going to make the attack a little slow, maybe like a 2. And the release, I'm going to kick that back to about midway. So let's see where that puts me. Double click and come back in. A little pushback on that, which tells me that it's going to probably push that back in the mix a little bit. Isn't that beautiful? Look what it just did. It did exactly what it's supposed to do. It's kind of like the magic finger on the fader. It's doing the mix for me, which is great. Now, I said I had a little problem with the pad. Let's go ahead and do this. Let's click out of that. Let's hit the pad here. I'm going to take it back to the top of the mix. I'm going to throw an EQ in there. And as I said, I felt like it was getting a little bit abrasive. Notice I haven't touched a fader yet. I want you to notice that I have not touched a single fader yet. By the way, I apologize for the noise in the background. That's my furnace here in the studio. It kicks in. It's nice to have a furnace in the studio because during this time of year, it's getting a little chilly. So, all right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this. I've turned off all of the other bandwidths. I've settled it down to my high mid, and I'm going to tighten the Q up. I'm going to bring it up to plus 12 dB. Now, that sounds very generous, but that's what I'm going to do. Sounds pretty generous. Plus 12 dB. I mean, you should never really do a cut much over plus negative 6 dB. But this is a real aggressive frequency, so I want to go after it. You find it. Sweeping. Ooh. Widen that out. Okay, so that's out of the mix. Now let's see what it sounds like in the mix. I just cut it about 6 dB, 7.7 to be exact. Let me be a little more generous with that. I'm going to take it clear down to 12. Let's hear what it sounds like. Notice that it's real close to about the same frequency range that was before being offensive in the... Yeah, that's not horrible. Now I can make that a cascading thing where I say, okay, now later on what I'm going to do is I'm going to boost whatever I cut here. I'm going to boost somewhere else, but the reality of that in this particular mix is those frequencies are present in abundance in other pieces, kind of like there's not a darabuka, but a daiko drum, which has got some real nice high mid frequencies present. So, but okay, so there's that far into the mix. So let's go ahead and look at the tail end where the trombones come in. Trombones and notice that kind of cut that abrasiveness out. So when we're doing the okay, so I'm not overly blown away, ha ha ha, pun, with the brass there. So I'm gonna leave it as is. Now, Alzinski talks a lot about the left and the right and the broad, being the three elements of the mix, which is the panorama, the left to right. So that's the width, the height, which is the frequency, presence of the frequencies. That's the height of the mix, and the depth of the mix. So I'm going to do a little something with that first. So I'm just kind of take this daiko and pan it over here. I'm going to pan some of the other percussion elements over just a touch. Leave one in the middle. And I'm just arbitrarily doing this, and I think it'll sound just fine. I'm going to hit the sultry I'll put that over to the right. Just kind of giving it space. Give the pads a little bit of a tweak. And again, this is all, I've heard this mix enough times. I'm thinking, I think this is what I'll do. Now, as I said, Alzinski talks a little bit about the depth of the mix. Okay, so this mix right now is what I would call a very it's a very up close and personal mix. It's a very intimate mix, so you don't feel like you're in a room that's large and you're sitting back away from the stage listening to this orchestra. You're kind of looking at us and going, I'm sitting in the chair next to the clarinet player, kind of that presence. Now, if you choose that you don't want that, what you need to do is you need to have some depth to this mix. So what it will do, it will soften it up. It'll give it some depth and ambience that it doesn't have right now, and make it sound more alive. There's a lot of synthetic textures, and I think it could really benefit from having a little verb on this. So here's what we'll do. Selecting all the mixes here, all the mix buses here, the sub mixes that we did. I'm going to Alt-Shift, and I'm going to click on a send. I'm going to create a new track, and I'm going to call it verb, just because that's what I call things. So, and then I'm going to show you something here in just a second, which is kind of crazy. I'll click out of that. I'm going to grab my verb and drag it down here by the master fader. Don't forget to put an actual reverb in the insert of your verb track. That would be really silly for you to not do that. So here we go. Here's the reverb. I'm going to pick just a D verb. It's going to go to a default setting. I'm going to leave it alone because I'm not messing with it. It'll sound just fine. I am going to do something here though with it because just as a matter of discourse. So there's a low pass filter that's on this. It's off currently, and there's a high frequency cut. What I'm going to do to this so that it doesn't get too boomy is I'm going to put an EQ on that track. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to put this is an EQ 3-1. Okay, it's a single band. So I'm going to put a low pass filter on it. I'm going to cut it off. Let me see here. Make it plenty tight. And I'm going to take the frequency down to say around 480 something. And what that's going to do is that's going to cut the frequencies going into the reverb, and it's going to take all the bottom out of it. So the bottoms will remain very present and very full without a lot of wash on top of them, but the high frequencies will get just a little bit of wash from the reverb, which will add should add a nice shimmer to the top. We'll see how it goes. And then there's this thing. Now your choice on once you put a send in to Pro Tools is to click on it and make your adjustments this way. Or what you could do is go up to view and go up to expand sends and hit the send A, which is where it's set. And looky there. Now you get a fader. To zero out your faders to 0 dB unity gain, alt click on each fader. Look at that. It's crazy. All right. So let's back up the mix and see where we're at. You can hear that verb. And you should be able to hear that pan if you got headphones on right now. You want to see a mistake here? I double clicked over here. Get rid of that aux. It doesn't need to be there. But can you hear what's going on there? It's really present. It's got some depth to it. Let's go to the tail end of this mix where some problems could happen. Okay. Not horrible beginnings. So is that the end of the mix? Is that where I'm done? That's up to you. Really, truly, I've covered all of the things that I wanted to do. I put in the master fader. I put in a mix limiter. I've done some compression. I've done some EQing. I did my group mixes here. I took all of my tracks and I mixed them, submixed them into sort of quasi-like instrument groups. I did add a reverb. And I did do some gain staging. I did not use my faders. You can use faders. It's not illegal or immoral or fattening. You can do that. But this is kind of where I went with the whole project. So again, this is Sundrenched. It's a stereo mix, and this kind of covers all the rubrics necessities. And you can do more deep mixing on this, and that's great. I could probably spend about another hour and a half on this, but I really don't want to. So you guys have a great rest of your day and enjoy this time that you've got. And, mix away as you would like to.